Well, round two of the Stanley Cup playoffs carries on, and so does the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live, presented by Sticks.com. Katie Gauze joined by Emma Lingen and Mike Agello. And guys, check your pulse because that game was a battle. You're going to have to wake yourself up, smack yourself around. We still got some hockey to talk about, but listen, this is not a surprise. We know what we got from game one. And game two pretty much delivered a lot of the same. First impressions, we'll start with you, Michael, on, is this series living up to the hype? And by hype, I mean, is it exactly what we expected, which is essentially not a lot of hype and very much Carolina Hurricanes hockey, but Washington obviously getting the win tonight. Final score 3-1. The series all tied up. What'd you see?
The espresso machine was working overtime. I didn't have a lot of expectation in this series because, as I said to you when we were just chatting before we went live, the most dreadful of the 8 first-round series was Carolina, New Jersey. Nobody wanted to watch it because New Jersey didn't have Jack Hughes. It would have been a compelling series if Hughes had been healthy. Mm-hmm. And now that sort of has carried over in that Metro division. Not that Washington's not an interesting team, but I think everything was fixated this year on the Ovechkin goal chase. They had a fantastic year. They're the best team in the Eastern Conference. They just don't really play exciting hockey. And so when you've got the Rob Brindamore sort of 21st century version of the Roger Nielsen Peterborough Freeze and the Capitals, it's like watching chess on ice. And, it's just not that compelling. I'll just say that.
Yeah. Well, Emma, what was your impression? I mean, again, is this just more of the same? Are we kind of just buckling up for this to be 7 games of kind of exactly what we've gotten through too?
I don't really know. I think, to be quite honest with you, of course, obviously Washington won game 2, but Carolina to me was the better team for 2/3 of that game. Mm-hmm. But the one period that Washington won, they just had to win the second period, and that was all it took. And I think in a way it's like, I guess that's impressive, but at the same time, it's like, I don't know, it just seemed like, especially after game 1, we just saw so little from Washington. I think, even, and that carried into the first period of this one. We saw, I think through the last 4 periods they had played, so period 1 of this game and then the 3 periods before, they had like 19 shots on goal or something. And it's like, oh really my gosh, this is a snore. And so then, you saw them wake up in the second period, obviously, but I think that really the end of the first was the first time that we saw like sustained pressure from the Capitals in this series. And it was kind of like, ooh, this might get interesting. And it did for a few minutes. And then it just kind of went back to what it was. And it was like, oh, okay. Well, so we saw a glimpse of maybe what it could be, but it just wasn't sustained by either team.
Yeah, I think one thing that is fair to say of this series that we've seen that it was a question from the Carolina side of things and was something that we were kind of expecting to see a continuation of from Washington's side is we've gotten solid goaltending, right? Logan Thompson, again, even when, Washington wasn't having good moments, like you said, they really did just win that second period. Carolina dominating in attempted shots, really dominating in a lot of the puck possession and the control and those types of numbers. But Logan Thompson, 27 saves on 28 shots, a .964 save percentage. So he's excellent. He's doing what he needs to do. And I think if nothing else, that's another element that's going to keep this series interesting. I guess one question would be, is there a goaltender that you feel like is going to steal one of these games and get a shutout? I mean, it seems like that's going to be what it takes because this feels like it's going to be low scoring. We saw a little bit of special teams action from both sides. I guess maybe not if there's going to be a goalie that steals it, but maybe what's it going to take for one of these teams to get the ultimate edge to be able to come out victorious in a series that really feels like it's relatively evenly matched. And even in games when Carolina dominates, it feels like the right opportunity at the right time is really all it's going to take.
I thought Ray Ferraro on the ESPN broadcast was pretty insightful when he said Game 1 was a near perfect game for Carolina, where Carolina was throwing the puck at the net every chance they got, putting the pressure, trying to get in front of Thompson, take his eyes away, deflect the puck. And that in the end was the goal in overtime that Slayton scored. They weren't as effective playing that way this time around. And as Emma said, the first period I saw a glimpse of sort of regular season Washington where they were pressing. And then, the goal that they scored, the McMichael goal was off an error. I think it deflected off somebody's throat. And then it
did, Gostisbehere.
Yeah, and then McMichael went the other way and scores on the breakaway, and that's sort of the break. I mean, they got that break in Game 1 where they were getting completely dominated, and they get the first goal. Yeah. So Washington took advantage of one of their very few opportunities. It's really in Carolina. This series has been played, the first 2 games, the way Carolina wants it to be played, and that's the thing. If they keep playing what Rod Brindamore wants them to play, then Carolina has a chance in the series. If Washington plays the way they can, they'll blow them out of the water, because I don't think Carolina is as good as Washington.
Yeah, I think right now Washington is playing Carolina's game, or trying to play Carolina's game, and Washington got lucky this game and they were able to get the win, but they're, to Mike's point, they are not playing their usual brand of physical hockey. Like, they have areas where they can dominate. They have certain areas of the game where they do have an edge over Carolina, and I don't feel like they're tapping into those, at least not enough, because, I mean, first of all, perfect example, that post is going to haunt Anthony Beauvillier until the end of time from the first period. And it's like they kept getting these opportunities, and they kept, they're forechecking and they're working so hard to get the puck. But then once they get the puck, they're not putting it on the net. And I mean, we saw it obviously more in the second period and at the end of the first, but there was just no urgency to, like, sustained urgency, I would say, to put the puck on the net. And so it's like, all right, you're halfway there, you're forechecking, great, like really solid work there. But then once you get the puck, you got to do something with it. And then for Carolina, again, they have Washington right where they want them. They have them defending a lot, and they have them, kind of on their heels a little bit, but they aren't converting. And so I think it's just, I don't know if it's one thing, if it's going to be like, oh, who can convert on the power play, or which goalie can steal them a game. To your earlier question, Katie, I thought Freddie Anderson was fantastic tonight too. Yeah. So I don't think it's going to be goaltending that's going to necessarily decide this series if these 2 goalies continue to play the way they have been. But it's just, it's both teams are leaving something to be desired for sure.
Yeah, to your point, we've had a couple good comments come in. One of them reading, the Canes just can't convert, same old story. And this is something that maybe has gone to a point where we know that it does haunt Carolina to some degree, right? Because we've seen that their style of hockey is effective, but only so far, right? Here we go. We've got Wilson's out here like a one-man mission to win this series. And Emma, you mentioned, the physicality that we want to see from Washington, what we saw make them so successful in the regular season. I think Wilson's the one guy that kind of remembered that and has continued to try to carry it over. He was probably the best player on the ice for Washington tonight. He ends up with 2 points, one of them obviously being that empty net goal to kind of seal this game. But it feels like he is still playing to the identity that made this team successful in the regular season. And it's interesting because you've heard a couple different guys now. In the first game, it was Protas talking about what they needed to do better. Tonight, it was Dylan Strome in between periods talking about it. But it's always fascinating to me when teams are saying all the right things, but game after game, you're not quite seeing that develop. And is that a matter of Carolina just doing such a good job and not allowing them to play that game? Or is Washington trying too hard to be something that they're not? It's certainly something that as the series goes on and the complexion changes, you start to figure out, okay, who's controlling and running the narrative more. One topic I want to get into tonight. But first, I'll mention that this is Playoff Frenzy Live presented by Sticks.com. Don't break the bank to buy a stick when you can get a pro level composite stick without the pro level price tag at Sticks.com. That is Stix.com. Make sure you head over there and check it out. But heading into tonight's game, we saw Spencer Carberry making a little bit of an adjustment with the lineup for Washington. So Ryan Leonard, the star college player who came in towards the end of the regular season, a healthy scratch in this game. Taylor Radish takes his place in the lineup. So Leonard had 2 points in the 15 games he played. One of them was an empty net goal and then a secondary assist. So wanting to just maybe see a little bit of a different player out there tonight. Taylor Radish, obviously, with much more experience. Do we agree or disagree with the move of taking Ryan Leonard out and getting Taylor Radish put in there? Do we think it made any difference at all for Washington tonight from a good or bad perspective? What do you think, Michael?
I don't think it made a great deal of difference, but
Yeah.
I think if you're going to take somebody out of the lineup, the kid who's played 15 games in the NHL, that's an easy one. You put in somebody with a little more experience, you just tweak something. I mean, the one thing I did see that was sort of head scratching, but I understand, is that Spencer Carberry went mostly with 5 defensemen. Alexiev, the sixth, only had less than 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So and Sean McDonough on the ESPN broadcast was going on and on about Martin Fehervary and how important he was to the Capitals blue line. They overcompensated. They played Chychrun and Roy and Carlson 20 plus minutes. I don't know if they can get away with that through the entire series if you're loading 5 defensemen with 18, 19, over 20, 22, 23 minutes. At a certain point, they're going to wear down. So he's going to either have to play Alexiev a little more, or I don't know what the status of Fehervary is, but they have to hope that he comes back.
Yeah, I think that with Leonard, I mean, he had 1 assist through 6 playoff games, I think, before tonight, and he was averaging the least amount of ice time per game of anyone on that team. I think just a little over 10 minutes a game. He obviously hadn't scored a goal. Not that that's the only way he can contribute, but still, it seemed like even in game 1 against Carolina, I remember he had a really good chance, probably his best chance of the playoffs so far. On the breakaway, of course, he lost control of the puck, ended up getting a shot off, but it wasn't a great one. It went off of Freddie Anderson, and so he wasn't able to score. So it just, I don't know. Again, I don't know that it's a real needle mover, to be honest with you, and just the way that he's performed thus far. Again, it worked for Washington tonight, and I would imagine that means he may be scratched again for game 3.
Usually the rule of thumb, right?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so I think that if, not to say that him being scratched is the reason they won, but I think that that's kind of, if you have a winning formula, you stick with it. And so definitely not a cause for concern, I don't think, if you're a Capitals fan, about Ryan Leonard's future, his role with this team. I mean, it is still so early in his young career. So I don't think it's, this is not a move that I would read too much into if I were a Caps fan.
Yeah, I mean, these are young players, and the transition from college, again, college guys play, somewhere from 30 to 35, depending on how long you go games per season, right? He's already at half of that in the time that he spent with the Washington Capitals, hitting that 15 mark. So again, this is a lot more hockey, and it's at a level, these are grown men, not that college guys aren't bigger, but it's still, we hear about it all the time. The type of adjustment, the speed, the decision making, you have to be so much quicker with everything that you do. And I think Ryan Leonard really stood out in the best way during his stretch with Washington, and in the terms of the physicality that he was able to bring. And maybe, tonight it's interesting, we talk about maybe not seeing enough of that. That's certainly something that he isn't afraid to bring from his game. But again, you mentioned, Emma, with the ice time that he was getting, it's not a needle mover. He still has such a big future with Washington, and whether he gets back in during the playoffs or not certainly doesn't dictate the type of career that he's going to have and what he's going to be able to bring to the organization. But again, it's always like the conundrum for healthy scratches, because you want your team to win, but if they do, you're probably not coming back in the lineup, because coaches always leave things alone for the most part, unless there's injuries. So will be interesting to see whether we see him in game 3.
It's not only the physicality with Leonard. He's clearly trying to make his mark, and you saw it in the Montreal series where he got a little rambunctious and was hitting. And in you're down 1-0 in a series. You need to win game 2. You don't need a 21-year-old kid taking a dumb penalty.
True.
And that power play could cost you. So
right.
That's another reason why they probably put a more experienced Radish in the lineup.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element of discipline that is also part of learning how to be a professional hockey player. And it's something that you don't see guys coming right out of college. They're not always as polished. And again, like you mentioned, he wants to make his mark. He wants to make an impact, finding any way to, get the coach's attention and do something positive. But sometimes you try a little too hard. It ends up costing you if you end up in the box. All right, here we got another comment. Does this feel like playoff hockey to you, or is there another level coming? And I think it's a tough question to answer, because we kind of addressed this when we started, right? This is sort of what you get with these two teams, particularly with Carolina. Again, it's hard to say if there is another level coming. I think it's on Washington to force Carolina out of their comfort zone to bring another level, because if Carolina has it their way, this is exactly what we'll get the whole way through, don't you think?
Yeah, I think with Washington, we saw it in the first round, but it was the reverse. For the first, few games, it was like Washington was forcing Montreal to play Washington's game. So it's like, they can do that. Now, Montreal, obviously a much younger, much less experienced team, and maybe that was easier to do if you're Washington. But I think now with Carolina, they are standing their ground and saying, no, we're not playing your game. We're playing our game. And so It's kind of this standoff now, this game of chicken, and who's, which way is it going to go? And I think that with these two teams, granted, in fairness, I think that we've definitely been a little spoiled by the playoffs. This has been the playoff of the comeback this year. Between Winnipeg and Dallas and, all these crazy comebacks and hat tricks and whatnot, which I know we'll get into later. We have been a little bit spoiled, I think, by this year's other playoff series. But yeah, I think that one of these teams, I do agree. I think it's got to be Washington that's got to kind of find that next level and, basically drag Carolina along with them. And if they don't, then they don't, and then Washington moves on.
Yeah, there's a reason why teams want to dictate the pace of the game or the strategy, because if you're playing Carolina's game, well, Carolina's going to win that game most of the time. So Washington's got to force their hand and make them play maybe a more physical game, maybe a more grinding game, whatever Carberry wants to do. I think the one thing tonight, and you look at the Carolina roster, there's nobody to match Tom Wilson. Most teams don't have somebody who could, but there's not one player on defense or at forward who can stand up to him physically. And because you're just playing into his game. If you have a big guy who can stand up to him, then you somewhat neutralize him. But he is going to run rampant on Carolina and a lot of their small forwards.
And can I also just say, on the topic of Tom Wilson, obviously he has this reputation as being, the big physical guy, the guy who's not afraid to mix it up. And obviously that's something that he does. It's a role that he plays extremely well. A lot of people think he's a dirty player and has that grit that you need in the playoffs. Again, plays that role very well, but he also does so much more than that. And I think that, he impacts the game in every aspect. Whether he's hitting people or whether he's beating them with his speed or blocking shots. He is the ultimate power forward that I think he doesn't necessarily get appreciated for the multifaceted part of his game as much. And I think that, kind of doubling down on what we said about it's got to be Washington that's got to take this series to another level.
Mm-hmm.
It is, but I think it's got to start with Wilson, and I think that he has that game changing and that impact to be able to put the rest of the team on his back and say, all right, here we go. And I think that, and he does that in so many ways too, not just with the physicality, although that is a very important part of his game.
Yeah, just subtly, he puts Sebastian Aho in a headlock during
Well,
But this is a guy, he's standing in front of the net and causing chaos on the power play. He penalty kills. He blocks shots. I mean, he probably is the most impactful player on the Capitals. I mean, they have really good players, don't get me wrong, and Ovechkin always has an impact. But if you noticed, Ovechkin wasn't out there late in regulation
for quite a while.
So I don't know if it was an injury or if it was just the fact that
they were having to play defense. That's what it was.
There you go. And that's something the grade 8 doesn't do very well. Sorry.
Not as much now. I mean, Lord knows he still loves to throw the body, and give him credit for the physicality he's been able to bring throughout his career. On top of all the offensive production that he's obviously got the record for. But both great points made about Tom Wilson, and, heard it a lot on the broadcast, but this has been a storyline all year. I mean, this is a bit of a coming out year for him in terms of what he really is capable, right? 33 goals, 32 assists for 65 points in the regular season. And it's a testament to his game. It's also a testament to the offensive production that Washington had, right? I mean, as he goes, as Ovi went, Dylan Strome, all of these guys, had incredible seasons. For many of them, it is career years. And I think that's a combination of the style they play, Spencer Carberry's influence on what this Washington team has sort of transformed into from what we saw last year, where they were crawling into the playoffs with the worst goal differential in a long, long time. But certainly you got to give a lot of credit to a guy like Wilson, who really has, kind of changed a lot of opinions about him. Maybe, they're not fully willing to admit he's not the dirty player that he once was, but he's certainly found way more dimensions to his game than what he brought when he first started out in this league. And it's been fun to watch, certainly beneficial for Washington. All right. Well, speaking of offensive production, we talked about this a little bit later. Again, we have been spoiled this playoffs. And one of the reasons we've been spoiled is because we've gotten to see some crazy comebacks, some crazy games. And a few of them have come at the hands of the Dallas Stars, more specifically Mikko Rantanen, who has back-to-back games with hat tricks. The last game against against the Jets, they were down 2-0. Mikko Rantanen says, no, I'm thinking we're going to win this one. 3 straight goals, natural hat trick for Mikko Rantanen, and Dallas is up 1-0 in that series. I mean, at this point, what more can be said about the way he has handled the season that he's had, with the ups and downs, the emotional, aspects of what's been going on with his 2 trades, to be showing what he's truly capable of. I mean, it really is, someone said it online today, he's sticking it to Colorado, but I think it's more than that. I truly think that he is, trying to make sure everyone realizes that he is capable of being a superstar all by himself, and he's showing that this playoffs.
Well, that's what he always was, that in Colorado. He sort of, it's easy to get less notice when you're playing with McKinnon and Makar.
Yeah.
But, clearly he didn't want to go. They traded him because they couldn't get him signed to the number that they wanted. He goes to Carolina. He forces the issue and says, I'm not signing here. And, there were 4 teams that were, that he had chosen. One of them, I believe, was Vegas. It was Vegas, Dallas, Florida, and Toronto. So he wanted to go to a big market. He had the ability to force their hand, and they got Stankoven and a couple first-round picks. But oh my God, he's just been. Chris McFarland has got to be in his office, banging his head against the wall because he didn't get this guy. And I understand why he didn't get him signed, because they have to sign Makar in a year, and they're probably going to have to spend more.
But the cap is going up.
This is a guy who didn't want to leave, and you pay those guys.
Yep.
But he didn't.
Yeah, I mean, you don't find guys like him on the open market. Every year you can find depth. You can go out and plug and play in a few different players for your third and fourth lines. But what Mikko Rantanen is doing this postseason is proof that when you have a homegrown superstar that you drafted that has been a part of winning one Stanley Cup, you don't worry about whether you're going to sign them later. If you want to win now, you keep them right now. What have you seen, Emma?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would like to announce the rebrand of the Dallas Stars to the Dallas Rantanens, because that is who has been carrying them during this entire playoffs. I mean,
Yeah.
he has, and I talked about this on a previous show too, that Dallas has, I've always been fascinated by Dallas because I think that they have, such, their roster is constructed so well, and it's such a good mix, a good blend of like young homegrown talent, but they've balanced it against, guys that they've gone out and gotten in free agency, in trades, what have you. But they have so much forward depth. But in all that depth, they didn't really have a superstar. They
Right.
had guys who could play like superstars, or who maybe had a season like a superstar,
Mhm.
but they didn't have, a McKinnon or a McCarr. And now Mikko Rantanen is their superstar,
Yeah.
and he's playing like one when it matters the most. And so I think that, again, to the earlier point about him, wanting to stick it to Colorado, I mean, maybe that's just human nature. Maybe a small part of that is true. But I think, to your point, Katie, I think it's a little bit more about proving himself, because
Yeah.
normally if you hear that a guy has played for 3 different teams in one season, it usually means he's not very good. And
Yeah.
this is, I
Very
think it's
much
about
not.
him trying to kind of prove to himself, prove to the world that, he is this superstar caliber player, and he has silenced a lot of doubters, and he's had quite a few of them. I think that, he is doing exactly what the Stars need him to do. Now, if you're Dallas, that's great, but I think it would also be nice if some other people started scoring some goals. But I mean, for now, I think it's
Right.
good that he is, playing that role that they need him to.
Yeah, and Mikko Rantanen, he's always kind of been a fascinating player in that way. I remember when I was still out there in Colorado, there was the debacle of when Arturi Lekkonen's father went on a podcast and started talking about how Mikko hadn't trained as hard over the summer and he wasn't playing up to his standard. And I'm pretty sure right after that, Mikko Rantanen went on an absolute tear. And kind of again, it was like I remember being in a scrum where he called him out and silenced the haters, and he is doing that now. I mean, on another level. But when you're that skilled and you're that talented, that's exactly what you do. And he's capable of that, and he is proving it. And what's exciting from a Dallas standpoint is that, Heiskanen is still not in the mix, right? When he gets out there, I would love to see what this chemistry like is going to look like between Rantanen and him. We just get Robertson now back in the mix, so they're going to be able to build. I mean, things are trending for Dallas in the opposite direction than it's happening for a lot of teams. So a lot of teams at this stage of the game are losing players. Dallas got through that first round without them. Now they're gaining guys back. And that is a scary thought, because behind all of this action is Jake Ottinger, who has been, like we've talked about, one of the best goaltenders in the postseason. It makes Dallas a very scary prospect. All right, well, let's take a look at the other game we've got going on tonight. The Edmonton Oilers and the Vegas Golden Knights. In between periods, it's 1-0 Vegas. But don't let that scare you, because it doesn't mean anything. Edmonton came back in great fashion and won that first game. So Vegas is looking to make sure they don't leave their home ice without any wins to show for it. What have you guys thought, I guess, maybe of, again, what Edmonton maybe has been able to continue to prove? Because I think this is a series that, a lot of people figured Vegas home ice, they're one of the best teams at home during the regular season. Their barn's one of the hardest to go into. And then you add in the factors of, the goaltending situation in Edmonton. But seems like the Oilers have kind of found something. How far do you think it can take them?
Well, I mean, I don't know if this magic carpet ride of Calvin Pickard will last. I mean,
I know.
you ride the hot goalie, and there have been instances where backups, or I'm not insulting him, but he's been a backup for a few years, that they get hot and they stay in the net. Clearly, I think there's a crisis of confidence with Stuart Skinner. But in game one, I mean, Vegas had a 2-0 lead, and then they sort of sat back, and you just can't sit back against the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, the winning formula, which I thought Vegas would follow, and I obviously I'm doing the frenzy now, but I would think in game 2, they need to be more physical. They need to wear down Draisaitl and McDavid when you can catch them. And, if you knock those two guys out, the secondary talent on the Oilers most nights is not good enough to carry that team. Now, tonight, Pietrangelo is back in the lineup. That was a big thing because, he's a rock on their blue line. Apparently he had some sort of illness, but he's back. I think that'll make a big difference for the Golden Knights.
Yeah, I think, looking at, obviously, as you mentioned, Vegas up 1-0, scored on the power play. I think that, these are areas wherever, if you're Vegas, wherever you can find a little bit of an edge. Obviously, yes, Edmonton has McDavid and Draisaitl, and they will always have McDavid and Draisaitl, and that will always kind of be the great equalizer at the end of the day. But to Mike's point, I mean, you saw what happened against LA. LA took the 2-0 lead, and then they sat back and let them right back into it. So you can't let them back into it. And I think that looking at their, weak points, Edmonton has plenty, even without the goaltending. I mean, look at their defense. They have no business, doing this well with the defense that they have. I mean, especially even with Matthias Ekholm when he was healthy, their defensive depth was not there. And I think you look at Evan Bouchard, and that's great. He's a scoring threat, but can he defend in his own zone? Not really. Right. So I think you would have thought, at least I thought, and I think a lot of others did as well, that going from LA to Vegas, this is definitely, you're taking it up a notch in terms of competition level and the scoring threats on the other side. And so I think if you are Vegas, you have to understand that, and you have to use that to your advantage.
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see, because if Edmonton does take a 2-0 lead in this series, will the shoe be on the other foot? Will they have to learn to make sure they don't allow the same mistakes to happen that LA did in their series? Because again, the home ice advantage, it's so subjective. Every team has their strengths and weaknesses. On the road, some teams are lights out. There were years where Colorado, it felt like, was amazing on the road, and at home was invisible. So you never know what you're going to get. But it's interesting because it does feel like maybe Edmonton was able to learn something from what their opponent did in that first round to make sure they don't have the same outcome. All right, well, that does it for the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. We have a stacked Friday coming up. Of course, the series we've all been keeping our eyes on, the Toronto Maple Leafs with their big 2-0 lead in the series heading to Florida. Can they keep it going? It'll be interesting to see what happens down in Sunrise. We've also got game 2 of the Stars and the Jets. So we will all be back with that action big Friday night. Can we see what Toronto is capable of? Are they the real deal? I'm starting to see a few Leafs fans online maybe feeling a little good about this, which is kind of scary, because it's like, no, wait, don't do that yet. We've seen what happens. Michael, I know we could talk about that all night. We will save it for tomorrow. For Emma Lingen and Mike Agello, I'm Katie Gauze. Thank you for watching the Hockey News Playoff Frenzy Live. We'll see you after the action tomorrow night.